from my cold, dead hands.
In 2002, Charlton Heston stood before a camera one last time. The man who had parted the Red Sea and won an Oscar was about to share his most personal battle yet. As he began to speak, his words would break hearts across America. From civil rights marches to Hollywood epics, Heston had lived an extraordinary life, but it was his final message that would reveal his true character. Charlton Heston was born on October 4th, 1923. Some say he was born in Evanston, Illinois, but he always said it was no man's land, a nearby area that later became part of Wilmette. Even his name had some confusion. Officially, he was named John Charles Carter, but some sources say he was listed as Charlton Carter shortly after birth. His family had Scottish and English roots, connected to the well-known Clan Fraser. His parents, Russell Carter and Lilla Baines, lived a modest life. Russell worked at a sawmill, and money was tight. When Charlton was young, his family moved from the busy suburbs of Chicago to a tiny rural town called St. Helens in Michigan. It was very different from city life. Charlton went to a one-room school with only 13 kids. He was the only student in his grade, which meant he spent a lot of time alone. Without many friends, he used his imagination to create his own stories and adventures. He loved the outdoors, spending hours hunting and fishing in the woods. This quiet, simple life gave him a love for nature and made him very independent. In 1933, when Charlton was 10, his parents divorced. His mother took him and his siblings back to Illinois. A few years later, she married a man named Chester Heston. This was when Charlton's name started to change. His mother took her new husband's last name, and eventually, Charlton began using Heston too. The name Charlton came from his grandmother's side of the family, and he liked it enough to use it professionally. Even so, his friends and family still called him Chuck, a nickname from his original name, Charles. Charlton found his love for acting in high school at New Trier in Winnetka, Illinois. At first, acting gave him a way to escape from the tough parts of his life. He said it let him become someone else, which made him feel free. He worked hard in school plays, including one called Peer Gynt, where he showed real talent. His teachers noticed his passion and encouraged him to keep going. While Charlton also played football, it was clear that acting was what he loved the most. By the time he graduated, people were already talking about how good he was. In 1941, Charlton got a drama scholarship to Northwestern University. It was a big step for him. He spent a lot of time acting in plays, improving his skills, and learning more about the craft. These plays weren't just for practice. They were professional enough to catch the attention of people in Chicago's theater world. At the same time, the world was changing because of World War II, and it created a serious atmosphere on campus. Still, Charlton stayed focused on acting, knowing it was what he wanted to do with his life. Charlton Heston's journey into love and war began with a simple meeting in a theater class at Northwestern University in 1941. At just 17, he was a scholarship student, working nights as an elevator operator to make ends meet. Despite being exhausted from his job, he couldn't stop noticing Lydia, a fellow acting student with striking dark curls and big, expressive eyes. Their first meeting wasn't magical. Lydia thought Charlton was arrogant and full of himself. But when she asked him for acting advice, it sparked something. For the next 3 years, Charlton chased after Lydia, but she wasn't easy to win over. She was ambitious and didn't want to settle for being anyone's sidekick, especially as the chaos of World War II loomed. Eventually, on March 17, 1944, they got married in Greensboro, North Carolina. The wedding was rushed and simple, held in a church with just 2 hours' notice. Lydia wore a lavender suit and a hat with flowers, which had cost her $50, a big expense at the time. But life was tough, and 2 years later, she sold the suit, the hat, and even her suitcase for $10 to buy Charlton a Christmas present. That's the kind of sacrifices they made for each other. Charlton joined the military at 20, becoming a radio operator and gunner on a B-25 bomber. He was stationed in the freezing, isolated Aleutian Islands. His job was dangerous. He kept communication lines open during missions and operated the plane's guns to defend against attacks. He flew combat missions over northern Japan, often facing brutal weather and low visibility. One slip-up could mean disaster. Once, he was injured on base when he fell on ice and was run over by an ambulance. This put him in a wheelchair for a while, but it didn't stop him from wanting to fight in the war. He believed he'd be part of a massive invasion of Japan, but that never happened. The atomic bombings ended the war in 1945, and Charlton later admitted he was grateful. It likely saved his life. When the war was over, Charlton and Lydia moved to New York to chase their acting dreams. It wasn't easy. They lived in a tiny apartment in a rough neighborhood, paying just $30 a month. There was no hot water, so they had to heat water on the stove for baths. To survive, they worked as artists' models, posing for students. They often didn't have enough to eat. Sometimes Charlton found work, and Lydia didn't. Other times, it was the opposite. But they stuck together, facing every hardship with humor and love. Things finally started to change in 1947 when Charlton got a small role in a Broadway play called Antony and Cleopatra. It wasn't a big part. He played a minor character named Proculeus, but the play was a big deal, with famous actors like Katharine Cornell and Godfrey Tyrrell in the lead roles. For Charlton, it was a step in the right direction. Sharing the stage with such experienced actors taught him a lot, and it gave him the confidence to keep going. The play ran for several months, giving the Hestons a small taste of stability after years of struggle. At 26, Charlton Heston's big break in Hollywood came in 1950 with the film noir Dark City. It happened by chance when Montgomery Clift, the original choice for the role, dropped out just days before filming began. Heston stepped in, making a quick transition to the world of professional filmmaking. The production wasn't smooth sailing, though. Midway through filming, the budget was cut by 20%, forcing rewrites of important scenes. Heston, determined to prove himself, worked tirelessly. He even gave up his trailer and stayed up late learning new lines. His dedication caught the attention of seasoned actors like Elizabeth Scott and Vivica Lindfors, who became his mentors during the shoot. One of the most memorable parts of his debut was the toll it took on him physically. In a key fight scene, Heston insisted on doing his own stunts. The decision cost him dearly. He cracked 2 ribs and dislocated his shoulder, but kept quiet about his injuries to avoid delays. The pain added an authenticity to his performance, visible in several close-ups. Despite the challenges, Dark City earned $2.1 million at the box office, a solid success for its time, and launched Heston on his path to stardom. 2 years later, Heston's career soared with his role in Cecil B. DeMille's The Greatest Show on Earth. The way he got the part was as unconventional as the film itself. During a screen test, Heston's fearless handling of a circus elephant impressed DeMille so much that he offered him the lead role of Brad Braden, the circus manager. The film's production was massive, involving over 1,400 people, countless animals, and 85 train cars of equipment. To prepare, Heston immersed himself in circus life for 3 months, working alongside performers and workers from the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. he faced real dangers, including a lion escaping its cage and a trapeze accident that left him dangling 40 feet in the air. The film was a blockbuster, grossing over $36 million and winning the Academy Award for Best Picture. Heston's performance earned critical praise and solidified his reputation as a leading man. However, the demanding 10-month shoot left him physically drained, and he was briefly hospitalized for dehydration. Looking back, Heston credited The Greatest Show on Earth as the film that truly made him a star, paving the way for his iconic roles. Heston's relationship with DeMille became a defining aspect of his career. DeMille was a tough mentor, known for pushing actors to their limits. On the set of The Greatest Show on Earth, he famously had Heston redo a scene 47 times in a single day. While exhausting, this rigorous process built a bond between the two. DeMille believed in Heston's potential and took an active role in shaping him as an actor. He even advised Heston on his diet and fitness, famously recommending a daily mix of raw eggs, wheat germ, and brewer's yeast for vitality. Their collaboration reached its peak with The Ten Commandments in 1956. Casting Heston as Moses was a bold move, given his limited experience in biblical epics. To prepare, DeMille sent Heston to live in the Sinai Desert for 6 weeks, where he studied ancient Hebrew and learned to carve stone tablets. The film cost $13 million to make, which was the most expensive movie ever at the time. Heston was fully committed to the role. He grew his own beard and hair for 3 months, refusing fake ones because he wanted it to feel real. The famous scene where Moses parts the Red Sea was filmed twice because the first time a camera broke, ruining everything. The second time took a year to perfect and needed over 360,000 gallons of water. While filming in Egypt, Heston had a close call when a 1,000-pound stone prop almost crushed him, but missed by inches. The movie became a massive hit, earning $122.7 million, which would be over $1.2 billion today. Many people were so moved by his performance that they believed he was destined to play Moses. In 1959, Heston starred in Ben-Hur, another film that broke records. It took nearly a year to film, with over 50,000 people working on it. Heston prepared for the role by losing weight and learning how to drive a chariot for 15 weeks. The chariot race scene, one of the most famous in movie history, took 10 weeks to shoot and was incredibly dangerous. Heston did most of his stunts, and during one, he was thrown from his chariot and almost trampled by horses. He ended up with injuries like a dislocated jaw and torn ligaments, but he kept going. Years later, it came out that a stuntman died during filming, something that had been kept secret. The movie won 11 Academy Awards, a record at the time, including Best Picture and Best Actor for Heston. It made $146.9 million at the box office, which is over $1.4 billion today. Even President John F. Kennedy mentioned the movie in a speech about civil rights. Heston was so proud of being part of it that he gave all the money he earned from the film to charity, saying the experience itself was worth more than the paycheck. Heston's movies weren't just hits, they were groundbreaking. The Ten Commandments and Ben-Hur used tens of thousands of costumes, extras, and animals to bring their epic stories to life. The chariot race in Ben-Hur alone cost $4 million, which was more than most entire movies at the time. In The Agony and the Ecstasy, 1965, Heston played Michelangelo and learned to paint and sculpt for the role. The filmmakers even spent 18 months recreating the Sistine Chapel for the movie. In El Cid, 1961, he led massive battle scenes with over 7,000 extras and 10,000 horses. And in 55 Days at Peking, 1963, The production broke records with the largest film set ever built in Europe, costing $17 million, which would be over $150 million today. Charlton Heston wasn't just an actor. He was a force of nature, bringing passion and intensity to every role. Charlton Heston became a legend in science fiction with Planet of the Apes, 1968. The movie shocked audiences with its unforgettable ending. His character, George Taylor, finds the ruined Statue of Liberty and realizes he's been on Earth all along. This twist made history, but Heston almost didn't take the role. He thought the idea of talking apes was silly. It took a personal visit from the producer and reading the original book to change his mind. Once he accepted, Heston threw himself into the role. He studied how primates moved and made sure his body language looked realistic, especially in scenes where Taylor couldn't speak. At 43, he even performed his own stunts, including a dangerous 65-foot fall that he nailed in one try. Hours in the makeup chair gave him the worn-out look of a stranded astronaut. The movie became a massive hit and led to sequels, though Heston only appeared briefly in the second film. He insisted his character should die, even suggesting that Taylor blow up the entire planet with a doomsday bomb. That's exactly what happened, giving the series a dark and unforgettable twist. Decades later, the original film was honored by the U.S. National Film Registry for being culturally and historically significant. In Earthquake, 1974, Heston proved he could also lead a disaster movie. This film showed Los Angeles being torn apart by a massive earthquake. To make it feel real, theaters used a new sound system called Sensurround, which made seats shake like there was an actual earthquake. Some older theaters even had damage from the vibrations. Heston didn't just act. He did many of his own stunts, including wading through a flooded, debris-filled garage with live electrical wires. He got hurt multiple times, dislocating his shoulder and needing stitches, but he kept working. The film cost a fortune to make, but it was a huge success, earning millions and inspiring more disaster movies. Heston also loved westerns, and his favorite was Will Penny, 1968. In it, he played an aging cowboy, a simple but deeply emotional role. To prepare, he worked on a real cattle ranch, learning how to herd cattle and live like a cowboy. The movie used real cattle for the scenes, which led to some dangerous moments on set. Later, in The Mountain Men, 1980, Heston played a rugged trapper. He refused to glamorize the role, wearing dirty, authentic costumes and working in freezing temperatures. He even got hypothermia during filming, but didn't quit. In action-adventure films, Heston kept pushing boundaries. In The Omega Man, 1971, a story about the last man on Earth, he performed his own stunts, including driving through a wall of fire. For Skyjacked, 1972, where he played a pilot, he trained in a real flight simulator and filmed scenes at high altitude, risking sickness to make it look real. In The Naked Jungle, 1954, he faced an army of real ants, enduring bites and welts during filming. Charlton Heston's dedication and bold choices made him a star across every genre: science fiction, disaster films, historical dramas, westerns, and action adventures. Charlton Heston's journey in politics started with his strong belief in civil rights. In the 1950s and 60s, he was one of the few Hollywood actors to openly speak against racism. This was a bold choice at a time when many stayed silent. On August 28, 1963, he made history by joining the March on Washington. He walked alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and other leaders, carrying a sign that said, "All men are created equal." Despite the heat and threats warning him not to go, Heston gave a powerful speech at the Lincoln Memorial, just before Dr. King's famous "I Have a Dream" speech. In his speech, Heston reminded everyone that America was meant to be a land of freedom for all, not just a few. Heston's fight for civil rights didn't stop there. He protested against segregated restaurants in Oklahoma City in 1961, even though it put his safety at risk. He also worked closely with Dr. King as part of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, helping push for fair laws. In Hollywood, Heston made choices that showed his commitment to equality. He turned down a lead role in The Defiant Ones because he believed it should go to a black actor instead. Heston also stood against the Hollywood blacklist, which targeted people accused of being communists, refusing to stay quiet when others were being treated unfairly. But Heston's political views changed over time. By the 1970s, he began to distance himself from the Democratic Party. He supported Richard Nixon in 1972, surprising many who knew him as a liberal. Heston explained that he felt the Democratic Party had moved too far left. He often said, "I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me." This shift was influenced by his years as president of the Screen Actors Guild, where he saw political tensions firsthand. During this time, he also clashed with other Hollywood figures, like Jane Fonda, over issues like the Vietnam War. By the 1980s, Heston had fully embraced conservative ideas. He became a strong supporter of Ronald Reagan, helping with both his presidential campaigns. In 1986, Heston officially left the Democratic Party. He made the change public by tearing up his Democratic Party registration card during a press conference, a dramatic move that made headlines. Charlton Heston's journey into conservative activism reached its peak in the late 1990s and early 2000s when he became the president of the National Rifle Association, NRA. In 1998, at the age of 74, he was elected president and went on to serve 5 consecutive one-year terms, a record for the organization. Heston brought star power to the NRA, and during his leadership, membership grew dramatically, increasing from 2.8 million to over 4.3 million members. His presidency came at a time when debates over gun control were intensifying across the nation, and Heston's fiery speeches and bold gestures energized supporters of the Second Amendment. One of his most famous moments happened in May 2000. At the NRA's annual meeting in Charlotte, North Carolina, Heston held up a replica of a rifle over his head and said the words that would make him a legend. "From my cold, dead hands." This wasn't just a line. It was a powerful message to those who wanted stricter gun laws. It became a rallying cry for people who saw gun ownership as a fundamental American right. That image of Heston with the rifle became iconic, appearing everywhere from T-shirts to bumper stickers. Heston's work wasn't limited to dramatic speeches. He testified in front of Congress, arguing that the Second Amendment wasn't just about guns, it was about protecting freedom. He supported programs like Eddie Eagle, which taught kids gun safety, believing education was better than more rules. Under his watch, the NRA's political influence skyrocketed. They spent more money on elections and campaigned hard for pro-gun politicians. Heston himself went on the road, using his fame to draw crowds and help candidates win. Many people believe he played a big role in George W. Bush's victory in 2000 by energizing voters in key states. Heston didn't stop at gun rights. He spoke out on other issues too, like political correctness, which he called tyranny with manners. In a speech at Harvard Law School in 1999, he warned that a cultural war was threatening free speech and traditional values. These speeches made him a hero to some and a villain to others. Supporters saw him as a brave voice for American freedom. while critics thought he was stuck in the past. In 2003, Heston made his final public appearance at the White House. President George W. Bush gave him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, America's highest civilian honor. Heston spoke about his commitment to liberty and his belief in standing up for what you believe in. Even though he stepped away, Charlton Heston's influence didn't fade. His iconic line, "From my cold, dead hands," is still a powerful slogan for gun rights advocates. On August 9, 2002, Charlton Heston, the legendary actor known for unforgettable roles in films like Ben-Hur and The Ten Commandments, shared heartbreaking news. At 78, he announced that he had symptoms consistent with Alzheimer's disease. He made the announcement through a pre-recorded video at a press conference in the Beverly Hills Hotel. Just 3 years earlier, Heston had stood proudly at an NRA convention, holding a rifle high and declaring, "From my cold, dead hands." That image of strength made this moment even more striking. But Heston's decision to share his diagnosis showed a different kind of courage. Back then, Alzheimer's was not talked about openly. In his video, Heston spoke directly to his fans with grace and honesty. Though he looked weaker than usual, his voice was strong. He began by saying, "My physicians have recently told me I may have a neurological disorder whose symptoms are consistent with Alzheimer's disease." But he didn't let this define him. With determination, he added, "I'm neither giving up nor giving in." Heston even found a way to bring humor into his message. Referring to his famous role as Moses, he said, "I can part the Red Sea, but I can't part with you, which is why I won't exclude you from this stage in my life." This playful yet touching statement reminded everyone of the bold and confident man they had always known. He also wanted people to understand what might change. He said, "If you see a little less spring in my step, if your name fails to leap to my lips, you'll know why. And if I tell you a funny story for the second time, please laugh anyway." These words, so simple and human, made the disease feel less scary. He also quoted Shakespeare saying, "We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep." As he ended the message, Heston left a powerful thought. "I believe I'm still the fighter that Dr. King and JFK and Ronald Reagan knew, but it's a fight I must someday call a draw." These words reminded people of his incredible life, his work in movies, his fight for civil rights, and his friendships with great leaders. Charlton Heston spent his last years in a beautiful house in Beverly Hills. It wasn't just any house. It was built after he became a star with Ben-Hur and designed by the famous architect William S. Beckett. The home was big, over 5,000 square feet, with bold roof lines, walls made of glass, and a grand 2-story library. Heston passed away at home on April 5, 2008, at the age of 84. For 6 years, he had been fighting Alzheimer's, but he faced it with courage. When he died, his wife of 64 years, Lydia, was right there by his side. The world mourned his loss. President George W. Bush called him a man of character and integrity, while Nancy Reagan remembered him as a hero both on and off the screen. A week later, on April 12th, a funeral was held at St. Matthew's Episcopal Church in Pacific Palisades. Many famous people came to say goodbye, including Arnold Schwarzenegger and Olivia de Havilland. Through all the ups and downs in his life, Lydia Clark Heston was always there for him. She also stood by Heston's side during big moments, like their involvement in the civil rights movement. When Heston got sick, Lydia stayed with him every step of the way, proving their love and partnership were as strong as ever. Their marriage lasted 64 years, a lifetime of respect, support, and shared dreams.